Morning, everyone. Is it working? Yeah, it is. The plan of this particular session is to warm you up a bit. It's cold in here, right? Amazing. Yeah. So Mark will do a terrific job of exciting you all. Now, the session today, or this particular session, is about the AMBA and BGA accreditations, the differences, the criteria, and so on. But the main goal is basically to answer all your questions. So what we will do is we will start with Mark. He will present 10, 12 slides in total, I think, something like that. And then we'll open up for Q&A. And I also would like to introduce Carlos. He's the liaison officer for Latin America. And Richard is also sitting over there. He's also an expert on BGA and AMBA. So he's also ready to answer your questions. Right. So Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Steef. Well, I think I might have to just scrap my entire presentation and do something completely different if we're going to have to excite you and warm you all up. But I will see what I can do. There is a kind of a huge amount of content here, really, to try and fit into what we're going to try and do in half an hour to leave space for questions. So I'm really just going to scratch the surface of both the AMBA and BGA accreditation processes. What that means, hopefully, is that there'll be lots of really, really good questions from you all of things that I've missed out intentionally, of course. So please do make sure to ask those. It'd be so great if you could do it as a group session rather than come up to me or to Steef or Carlos or Richard individually. You can do that as well, of course. But we're all here to learn from each other. So please do ask your questions in this session, and we'll do our best to share our perspectives with you. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is just to explain a little bit about the differences between the two brands, AMBA and BGA, so that you've got an understanding of how they fit within the organisation. So the key thing to take away from this is that there are two distinct brands under one organisation. So the organisation name has changed with the launch of BGA to AMBA and BGA. So they both sit alongside each other. But they are completely separate and distinct. So one is not a pathway into the other. One is not above or below the other. They are two separate and distinct brands within one organisational umbrella. Okay, and just to illustrate that a little bit, I won't talk about every single one of these points, but this sort of table sort of summarises the key differences between the two brands. So just to pick up on a couple of the points here, AMBA is very much aimed at quality enhancement. So you have to be your MBA has to be demonstrably excellent before you can engage with us in the accreditation process. Whereas for BGA, we are much more focused on quality improvement. So we'll take you on a journey. That journey, the length of that journey, the intensity of that journey will depend on where you are in your quality cycles. But we will take you on a journey and help you to improve as part of that process. AMBA obviously is focused on the MBA portfolio. So that is what we are accrediting, whereas BGA is accrediting the whole school. And as part of the AMBA process, you are provided with if you like, a professional mentor. That's one of the AMBA accreditation directors. That'll be myself or my colleagues, George and Catherine, and we will support you through the process. Whereas within BGA, there is an academic mentor. So although there is also myself to support you, and Richard as well, in terms of the sort of the admin, the office side of things, you will be provided with an academic mentor to help and support you through your BGA accreditation journey. So let's start with BGA and explain to you a little bit about what BGA is and how it operates. So BGA is a heritage organisation. So what that means is that BGA was actually the original name of AMBA when it was launched in 1967. Changed its name to AMBA in the 1980s. So essentially what we did was we sort of dusted off that old brand name, but didn't want to bring it back with the flavour of the 1960s. We wanted to make sure it's really up to date. So we tried our best to design it to have a really innovative focus, and I'll explain to you in a moment a little bit about how we see that coming to life through the BGA systems and the services that we offer. So the vision of BGA is to be the global movement for responsible management, positive impact, and lifelong learning. And those three elements are the core pillars on which BGA accreditation stands. Okay? And then drawn from that is the 9 points of what we call the BGA Charter. These are, if you like, the rules of engagement with BGA. So for any level of working with BGA, whether you're a business school, whether you're a student, whether you're a corporate organisation, you need to sign up to say that you agree with and you believe in these 9 points of the BGA Charter. I'm not going to go through each one of them in detail with you now. They're all available on our website. You can look at them. But they feed the 3 pillars and they filter through to the whole BGA accreditation criteria. Okay, so when I mentioned we try to develop and design BGA with an innovative focus, these are some of the areas that I would consider to be particularly distinctive features of the BGA, both the membership but also the accreditation process. So we are focused very specifically on responsible management broadly, but also on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Now, I know most organisations you will deal with business schools, deal with accreditation, will talk about responsible management just to some degree, and of course you would expect that. But we are the only ones that I'm aware of that really focuses that as one of the 3 core pillars, and really throughout the entire accreditation process, you really have to demonstrate how you are dealing with some of those United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We wouldn't necessarily expect you to deal with all 17 of those, but we would expect you to have a really good understanding of which ones you've chosen, why you've chosen them, and how you can demonstrate you're having an impact in those areas. I mentioned impact. We have the continuous impact model. I'll talk to you in a bit more detail about that in a moment, but this is our system to enable, force you to be able to prove that you are having an impact on your external environment. We've created what we think is something quite unique in our industry, which is an optional validation process. This is something that can be seen as an in-between step from membership to accreditation. It's not something that you have to take. You can go straight to accreditation if you wish to do so. But this is essentially a desktop process, much lighter in terms of the resources, the time required, and will enable you to get a quality label that is a bit less involved than a full peer review accreditation process. So this can be particularly useful or interesting, I think, if you are a business school that hasn't engaged in international accreditation processes before, you're a bit unsure about what it will take, whether you're ready for it or not. So validation can be a really good option for you if you're in that situation. We offer free student membership to all your students across your business school once you become a member of BGA. So that's something that no other organisation in our industry offers. Once you've achieved validation and accreditation, that also opens up to your alumni as well. We offer a whole range of services, both at the networking and the lifelong learning levels. And then consultancy. We really believe that we've built in some really strong value-added parts to our service portfolio that really supports our schools in their continuous improvement journey. So 2 areas I'll mention here. One is the capacity building workshops that we offer. Again, this is free to all our BGA member schools. These are really designed with specific focus on key areas that business schools struggle with, or key areas that are really of the moment that business schools should get together to discuss. The other area of consultancy I'd pick up specifically is the consultancy review. So every BGA member school once a year has the opportunity to get a free consultancy review, which utilises both the BGA accreditation staff and our faculty of assessors to provide a consultancy paper on an element that you want us to have a look at for you. So usually most schools choose a program that they want to get some feedback on, how it can improve, how it aligns with international standards, that kind of thing. But you could choose your internationalization strategy, for example, and we would give you some feedback on that. So we think that's a really powerful element of the BGA process that we offer all our schools as part of their membership services. And this just illustrates those 3 tiers of engagement that I've sort of talked about for BGA. So there's the bronze level, which is membership. The validation, again, an optional element that you can choose if you wish. Silver, and then achieving accreditation we see as the gold standard in the BGA system. So 3 specific features that we think are quite important in the BGA accreditation process. I've sort of mentioned these before, and I'll come back to them again as I go through this presentation. The continuous impact model that we see as a really vital part of what BGA is and what BGA stands for, and we think it's a really powerful way to get business schools to be able to think about how they can prove they're having an impact. The academic mentorship that I've talked about, we think that's a really important part of supporting schools through their accreditation journey. And then the other element I'll mention is that we look at 2 sample programs throughout the accreditation process. Now, as I've said, BGA is accrediting the whole school, so we are not accrediting these specific programs. We are looking at these programs as examples of what you're doing across the whole school. So it allows us to drill down a little bit to get a bit more understanding of what you might tell us, for example, that you're doing in terms of, integrating responsible management across all your curricula. For example, if it's not present in one or both of the sample programs, there's obviously a disconnect there and some more work to be done. So that's just an example about how we use those sample programs as that. We're not accrediting those programs. They're just examples just to allow us to get a little bit more detail in terms of what you're doing and how it operationalizes through your programs. Okay, so the continuous impact model, this is something that a lot of schools have, let's say, a bit of trepidation about. So I'll do my best to sort of try and sort of simplify this for you in a couple of minutes. So obviously this has been designed, as I've said a couple of times already, to be able to get business schools to really think about how they can prove they have an impact. It's very easy to think about that is sort of a nebulous way. Of course, with business schools, of course, we have an impact, or to think about it in sort of anecdotes and stories. Well, we've got some 2 or 3 amazing alumni that have gone on to do great things. So of course, we're having an impact, and these are all, of course, very valid things. But we want to make sure that the continuous impact model captures those things in a systematic way that really enables you to show to the outside world, not just internally to BGA, that you are having an impact. So the key element really to think about in terms of the definition of impact for BGA is that we want to see that you are having an impact on your external environment. Okay, so that's very important when you're thinking about putting your continuous impact model together. What we don't want to do is, for example, to say, well, we invested £3,000 in marketing and we recruited 10 more students. Of course, that's an impact in a sense. That's not the sort of impact that we're interested in measuring. We're interested in measuring how is what you're doing having a real impact on your external environment, on your stakeholders, on your local economy, on the environment more generally, so in terms of climate control, reducing carbon emissions, those sorts of things. So these are the 6 areas that we look at in the continuous impact model. You have to choose 5 of those, so you can essentially discard one that's probably least relevant to you, to your mission, to your strategy as a business school, and then you're asked to develop metrics within those 5 areas and to measure them over a period of 2 years. Okay, so that's essentially that you need to have 3 data points. So that would be what we call year 0. So when you've designed your continuous impact model, what's your measurement of your impact then at the end of year 1, and then at the end of year 2. And then the continuous impact model essentially asks you to then develop a narrative about what you've learnt from that data collection. Okay, so while obviously I'm sure we would all love to see that at the end of year 2 there's a really positive outcomes across all of those elements, it's not an issue if that isn't the case over all of them. 1 or 2 might have stayed stable, 1 or 2 might have declined slightly in terms of what you wanted to see in terms of you increasing your positive impact. But what's important is that you can develop a narrative from that. You can show what you've learned from that process and what steps you will take to make sure that impact actually shows a positive trend moving forward. Okay. Okay, so this is just to outline the BGA accreditation process for you. So it's a 4-stage process. So stage 1 is the application stage. So you complete an application form, which basically gives us an idea of whether you have enough of the key elements, mostly under the areas of the 3 core pillars and the BGA charter, that whether we think you've got a good sort of starting point to achieve BGA accreditation. Stage 2 is where the majority of the work happens. This is where the minimum 2-year process comes in. This is where you have to develop your continuous impact model. You're appointed an academic mentor. They work with you to help you develop any areas that need developing, any areas where you might have particular areas of weakness or areas where you think you could improve, and your mentor will work with you to help bring those up over that period. And then once you think you're ready, and then once your mentor thinks you're ready, you can then proceed to the assessment stage 3, which is where the peer review assessment visit happens. So those of you who are familiar with AMBA or with any other international accreditations, it's a peer review process. We'll come and spend 2 days at your school. It will be that the team will be a member of the AMBA and BGA accreditation team, and then 3 peers from other AMBA or BGA accredited schools that will come and look at your school in light of the 3 pillars, the BGA Charter and the BGA accreditation criteria. And then stage 4, that's the post-assessment stage, that's sort of tying everything up, the reporting and things like that. Okay, so these are sort of some of the areas that I would sort of point towards in terms of trying to have the most success within the BGA accreditation process. The first thing I'd say is that if the rate determining step of the BGA process is the continuous impact model, which it is, then if you want to move as quickly as possible through the BGA accreditation process, you really need to focus on getting your continuous impact model designed, signed off and approved as soon as possible, because that will then start that 2-year process. That minimum 2-year process, you might decide you need longer to work on other areas, and that's totally fine. It's not a maximum 2 years, it's a minimum 2 years. But if you're looking to achieve the BGA accreditation within 2.5 years, you really need to get that continuous impact model designed as soon as possible. So your mentor will work with you on that and try and sort of engage you and make sure you're staying on track with that. But yes, if you want to move quickly, that needs to be your first port of call, if you like, once you enter the BGA accreditation process. And in fact, even if you're thinking about entering the process, or maybe you're just submitting your application form and waiting to get a response on that, you should already be starting to think about the sort of areas that you would like to measure in terms of your external impact. In terms of helping you with that, I think it's really important to look inwardly to your own faculty expertise to help you with that. I mean, if you think about your research methods faculty, for example, they should be experts in terms of distilling things down to measurable items. Okay, so utilize them in terms of thinking how you might be able to measure your impact. You look at your strategy faculty, for example, and if you think of the elements of the SIM as KPIs, if you like, maybe they could help you with, again, thinking about how you can look to distill these things down to measurable concepts. So use your faculty expertise, not just for the SIM, but also for other areas of the BGA accreditation process. Think about for lifelong learning, think about for responsible management. How can you utilise your own expertise to help you? It should not just be one person. Of course, one person probably needs to lead the process, but it shouldn't really just be one person who is taking on all the work in terms of making sure the BGA process succeeds. And then the third thing I would say, and your mentor will encourage you to do this anyway, but to really think about conducting a gap analysis of your school against where you stand on the core areas of BGA and work on those. So those 3 levels, the top level, if you think of it as a pyramid, the top level is the 3 pillars. So again, impact, responsible management, lifelong learning. If you're not meeting two of those 3, for example, then you're not going to have a great chance of success in the BGA accreditation process. So those are things you need to focus your work on. The next level down from that is the 9 points of the BGA Charter. So hopefully, if you're hitting all 3 of those 3 pillars, next look down at the BGA Charter. Where are potential areas of weakness? Where could you invest your time, your efforts on improving during this accreditation process? How can your mentor help you? How can your faculty help you to work on those areas? And then the third level, the bottom of the pyramid, if you like, is the full areas of the BGA accreditation criteria, the sort of the more detailed aspects of things that run through the pillars and the charter. Okay. I'm just going to spend a little bit of time talking about the joint accreditation process. So I was hopefully quite clear at the beginning that the BGA and the AMBA accreditations are very distinct. They're not designed to work to feed into the other, which is true. However, we obviously would encourage schools to achieve both AMBA and BGA accreditation if it's something that they wish to do. So the joint accreditation process is designed primarily for schools that already have AMBA accreditation that wish to add BGA accreditation onto their next assessment visit. Okay, so that's the primary way the process has been designed. Okay, and essentially it is designed to be a resource efficient and cost efficient means to achieve the BGA accreditation alongside your next AMBA visit. So it's one visit, one peer review team coming to visit you. You don't have to do two separate visits. You get a 50% reduction in the BGA accreditation fee by doing it in this joint way. It adds an additional half a day to the agenda. So the AMBA agenda is a day and a half. So this will make it up a full 2 days. So that extra half a day, we'd look at some of the specificities of the BGA accreditation. So we'll be looking particularly at responsible management, impact, and a second sample program. So we want to make sure we're covering the 2 sample programs. So as part of your AMBA visit, your MBA will count as that one of those sample programs. We then choose a second sample program to look at for the BGA process. And then as part of the joint accreditation exercise, you do not need to do a full continuous impact model. You will need to be able to demonstrate you have an understanding of your impact and you can measure your impact, but you don't need to formulate it in the full sim. What we do is ask you to produce what we call the impact responsible management exercise, which will be a presentation on how you are achieving these things. And then in most cases, most likely, we will then encourage you to formalize that a bit further in terms of making some of those impact metrics a bit more clear and distinct. Okay, so that's the joint accreditation process, as I said, primarily designed for schools that already have AMBA to add BGA onto it. Okay, so I'm now going to switch gears and talk to you about the AMBA accreditation process. So a lot of these things will be quite similar in terms of the fact that obviously it was designed by the same organisation, right? So we've not thrown everything out and started completely from scratch. So there are some things that will be familiar, but obviously the unit of analysis is quite different, and so there are some unique features of both the BGA and AMBA accreditation processes. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time talking about the key AMBA accreditation criteria. So the first point to make is that the AMBA unit of analysis is the MBA portfolio. And I emphasize portfolio because that means that anything and everything that you offer that's called an MBA must be submitted for accreditation. Okay? So you cannot pick and choose one MBA. You can't say our executive MBA isn't included because it's got an E in front of it. So everything that is called as awarded an MBA degree must be submitted for AMBA accreditation. Yes, we do have accreditations for what we call the MBM, Pre-Experienced Masters in Management, and the DBA. Those are optional extras. Or if you do not have an MBA at all, then you could also submit just for an MBM or just for a DBA. But if you have an MBA, that must be submitted for AMBA accreditation. There's no ways around that. Okay. We intentionally have very few quantifiable criteria in the AMBA accreditation process. But because of that, they then become quite important, particularly in terms of eligibility, if you're looking to apply for AMBA accreditation for the first time. So these are focused around the sustainability of the organisation. You must have been graduating MBA students for at least 3 years. Faculty, the majority must have a doctoral qualification. In terms of students, each student must have a minimum of 3 years work experience, and there must be a minimum of 20 students in each class studying together. And then in terms of hours, a minimum of 500 contact hours and a minimum of 1,800 student learning hours. Okay. So if you're looking to apply for AMBA accreditation and you're not meeting any of those, you're not going to have much chance of getting through the initial stages at this point in time.
Sorry, can you just repeat what faculty criteria was?
Yeah, so it's a minimum of 50% with a doctorate, essentially. Yes. Yeah.
And also, in terms of hours, because you said 500 contact hours, what about online hybrid?
very, very good question, Gaston. So, our definition of contact hours, whether it is synchronous or asynchronous, whether it's face-to-face or online, it's the same. Okay? So it's basically, to be a contact hour, it must have meet three particular areas. So one is that it must be mandatory, so it must be something that every student must do. The second is that it must be faculty supported, so students going off and doing group work on their own does not count as contact hours, but if a faculty member is walking around between the groups and facilitating the conversations, that does count. And the third element is it must take place within a student learning group. That does not necessarily mean the entire cohort, it doesn't necessarily mean the entire group of students, but they must be a group of students working together. So that means that essentially a one-to-one contact between a faculty and a student does not count as contact time. We would normally allow a small amount for, if a thesis supervision or something like that that's normally on a one-to-one basis, we would normally allow a small number of hours for that because it's obviously such an important part of a traditional master's level qualification, but normally that sort of interaction would not count as contact hours under our definition. But yes, whether it's synchronous, asynchronous, face-to-face, or whatever, it doesn't change. Okay? Yes?
You mentioned that students should have minimum 3 years of work.
Yes.
In India, we have a lot of students who are freshers. How would that be evaluated in terms of the criteria?
So there is a qualification in our criteria where if it's the national norm, and it's a minimum 2-year full-time program with a significant internship, and you can demonstrate exceptional input and outputs through the program, then you can have a pre-experienced MBA program. So that's in the criteria.
Because our government allows the
Yep.
MBA program to provide,
Yes, yeah, we understand that. Yeah,
freshers.
yeah, we understand that.
They would not want us to discriminate between working
Sure.
students and freshers.
Yeah, no, of course, yeah. No,
In that case, it is, you would consider that.
that is yes, exactly. That's written into our criteria. Yes, correct. But you have to demonstrate that you've got exceptional inputs and outputs through the program. So, we'd expect an equivalent minimum of 700 GMAT. So that would be sort of 90 percentile CAT. And we'd expect, obviously, very, very good employment records and things like that for those students.
Most Indian B schools provide placement.
Yes, I understand.
Would
Yeah.
that be considered as an exceptional movement?
Yes,
from
yes.
where you were to what
Yes.
you achieve at the end of
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so consumer focus. So we are, I think one of the things that differentiates AMBA and BGA is that we are a consumer organisation. So we were established by MBA graduates. So really we exist to promote quality management education to us and for our stakeholders. So I've put this in here because really when you're thinking about the AMBA accreditation process, what we really want to be able to do is say to ourselves, would we recommend this program to potential students? Okay? So when you're thinking about whether you're meeting the AMBA accreditation criteria, bear that in mind. Are you fulfilling your promise to your students? Okay? So that's a really important part of how our ethos, if you like, how we conduct our accreditation. It's important to state that we do spend quite a lot of time looking at the wider institution, and by institution I mean business school or equivalent unit. So obviously we are looking, as I said already, at the MBA portfolio, but we do spend a lot of time looking at the context in which that MBA program operates. So we will ask a lot of questions about the institutional sustainability, how some of the other elements support the MBA, so maybe looking at things like executive education and things like that, and how that can filter through to support the MBA program. So there will be quite a significant part that looks at the business school or whatever the equivalent unit is that surrounds the MBA and helps deliver the MBA program. And then the final point here, these are just some of the really key areas that we look at, particularly in terms of the MBA curriculum, in terms of the MBA learning outcomes, and in terms of what we want to see you producing in terms of your MBA graduates. So I put here leadership. We firmly believe that the MBA should be developing high-quality business leaders. We believe that they should be promoting the values of responsible management and ethical decision-making. And as a core part of that, we really see integration as something that's very important, and that it's something a lot of schools don't pay a lot of attention to, as to how their individual courses are brought together and how that sort of helps students and graduates really be able to piece all these pieces together and to actually have a holistic understanding of management education. I probably could have added international to that list as well. We do think that the MBA should prepare students and graduates to work in an international environment. Doesn't necessarily mean that all your programs have to be international, doesn't mean they have to be recruiting international students, but we would expect them to have an international outlook and be able to operate in the international working environment when they graduate. Yes?
In terms of a business school being separate from the main campus of the university, do you consider that things like infrastructure, technology?
Absolutely, yes. Yes, that would be a very important part of what we look at through the process. Yes.
How do you evaluate the integration as a criteria?
Normally, that would be through a capstone project or a capstone course. It could be a thesis. That's sort of the traditional way of doing it. But a thesis can be quite specialised. So you need to sort of build frameworks around that to ensure that it is an integrative piece that brings various elements of the programme together. Yes, Anissa.
I'm sorry to give a remark, but I would very much appreciate if everybody who puts a question say it loudly, because we hear your answer, but we don't know on what you are answering.
Okay.
Thank you very much. My question was, how do they evaluate that the integration has actually happened?
Thank you.
That was
Okay.
Thank you, but this is the third question already that I didn't hear.
Okay, so we're entering the last 10 minutes, so I'm going to just rattle through the last of this presentation. It's great that people are asking questions, by the way, and that helps keep things lively. So please do continue to do that. But I'm just going to rattle through the end here. So the AMBA accreditation process is quite similar to the BGA accreditation process in terms of it's got 4 stages. So application stage. That's essentially an internal process of approval, so that will come to me or one of my accreditation director colleagues to decide whether you're meeting mostly the key quantifiable criteria at that stage. The pre-assessment stage requires you to submit some slightly more detailed information in what we call the self-assessment form. That then has to go to our International Accreditation Advisory Board for their endorsement to proceed. So you've sort of got 2 levels of approval, if you like, through the AMBA accreditation process. Then you go to the assessment stage, which is where the peer review visit happens, and then the post-assessment stage, similar to the BGA, that's sort of tying up the admin odds and ends. So the reason stage 3 and 4 are in bold is because if you're going through the AMBA re-accreditation, you start at stage 3, so you don't have to do stage 1 and stage 2 all over again for an AMBA re-accreditation, and also the same for BGA as well. Okay. So the documents you're required to submit for the AMBA accreditation, the SAF and the SAR. The SAF, the self-assessment form, is essentially, think of it as the data part of the process. So this is very much filling in tables where it's sort of free text, keep it short, bullet points, etc. The SAR, the self-audit report, is your narrative. So think of that more in terms of telling a story of your institution. You've got to complete it in terms of following the guidelines of the accreditation criteria, but think about how you can write it in a way that really tells the narrative of what your business school is achieving. You can add appendices to that, so we would normally say a good SAR could be done in about 120 pages. We don't set page limits, but that's sort of a good guide to a good SAR. But obviously if you want to add appendices to that, you can do. And then the base room, this is basically where we ask for additional information to be ready for when we come to do the peer review visit. We've got documents which outline everything that we'd ask for, to expect to see then. The only point I point to the base room, in fact, I think I'll come to the final slide anyway, so I'll leave it till then. So the visits, it's a day and a half, similar to the BGA visit as well. So day 1, we basically spend in the base room as an assessment team discussing what we're going to do, what questions we're going to ask, what the areas are that we want to drill down into more. We'll have a short tour of the campus. And then day 2 is where we'll meet the business school, the senior management team, stakeholders, faculty, and things like that. And an important thing to mention, both for AMBA and BGA, is that we'll always give you verbal feedback on what our recommendation will be at the end of the visit. So we don't run away and write a report that we send to you in 2 or 3 weeks' time. We'll always look you in the eye and give you some verbal feedback on what our recommendation will be. So very, very quickly, so we save for the last 5 minutes for any other questions. Some tips for success for AMBA. Remember, it's the entire portfolio. Look at the key quantifiable criteria first, because as I've said, if you're not meeting those, you're going to have some problems. Then think about your gap analysis, think about where the areas are where you could strengthen, and think about how you could strengthen those as you lead up to your accreditation or your re-accreditation. When it comes to the visit, when it comes to completing your documentation for the visit, be as open and transparent as possible. It's far better for us and for you if you're open about where your struggles might be. We come in wanting to help you. We always do that. So it's much better if you can be open with us. It sets a really good stage for discussions going forward if you can be sort of quite open about some of the challenges you might have. We all have challenges as business schools. So the peer reviewers that come in are going to have, they might have the same challenges, but will have challenges. So they'll be open to discuss those with you. When it comes to the visit itself, consider the group size and dynamics of the visit. Don't fill a meeting or fill a lecture hall with 300 people for us to talk to. You can't have any constructive discussions with 300 people. So try and make sure those are the right sort of size to enable the scope and the breadth, but also to enable us to have good discussions. And then in terms of the base room, very quickly, as I said, we give you documentation that we expect to see in the base room, so follow that as best as you can. But the key areas to think about, you must include a good range of student work, and with that must be attributed grades and any feedback that's provided. That's really important. And also make sure that there are minutes of meetings that are relevant to the MBA and the school in the base room as well. Quick rule of thumb for the base room, you can never put too much information in the base room. If you're not sure, put it in there. There's always going to be an element of sampling. We're never going to read everything that's in the base room, but if you're unsure, put it in. For the advanced documentation for the SAF and the SAR, keep it concise, keep it short, keep it brief. But if it's for the base room, if you're not sure, put it in there. Okay? Right, we've got 3 minutes 54 seconds left for any questions. And Steef, I don't know if you wanted to say any sort of concluding remarks.
Not a lot of time for questions, so thank you, Mark.
Yeah, please. Let's go.
Hello, just a quick question returning to what was asked earlier about the contact hours, especially the asynchronous versus
synchronous.
So you defined it, or you defined the what contact hours means. Is there any sort of criteria around a minimum number of synchronous versus asynchronous?
Yes, so there must be a minimum of 120 synchronous. That could be face-to-face or online. It doesn't matter for that, but yes, there must be a minimum of 120 synchronous, so real-time contact hours. Yes, correct. Gaston, did you have a question?
My question is about the cap of
Yes.
AMBA. I mean, this morning was mentioned that you are thinking about this, and also you spend like 50% with the AMBA accreditation, 50% of the time. Is it something that's coming? Can we be looking for AMBA again, or only BGA?
Yeah, sure.
It was the 294 when I was in my former school, so I was just there.
Yeah. I mean, I genuinely do not know the answer to that. If I did know, I might not be able to tell you, but I genuinely do not know the answer to that. So I think it's likely that there might be an easing of the 300 cap, but I genuinely don't know the answer to that. If there is an easing of it, it will most likely be an easing, so it's not going to be a free-for-all open to everybody. But I honestly do not know any more than that. So yeah.
Only for the council, basically.
Well, yes. I genuinely don't know. Yes.
And BGA is going to be a cap?
No.
Number?
No, certainly that's not in our thinking at the moment, no.
So when it comes to accreditation, what are the key things that business schools should look at?
Hello, what do you say?
When it comes to re-accreditation, what are the key things that business schools should consider before you guys come for visits?
So, well, I mean, I would say if it's for AMBA, it's the quantifiable criteria, because those are the things, if you're not meeting those are where you're going to struggle. If it's BGA, it's look at the 3 core pillars. So look at what you're doing in terms of responsible management, what you're doing in terms of impact, and what are you doing in terms of lifelong learning. Those are the sort of the key headline areas. If you're meeting all 3 of those, you're going to have a great chance of success for BGA.
What's the pros and cons for a B school for having acquired a BGA vis-a-vis an AMBA? Because you have a cap on AMBA and BGA, there seems to be no cap. So what's in for us if we go for BGA vis-a-vis we go for AMBA and the knots also?
Well, I mean, I certainly tried to talk about the key range of services that we offer in BGA. You know, they're really extensive, so they're really worth your time and your investment in doing that. If you're a business school that really believes in impact and responsible management, then BGA is all about that. So that gives you an opportunity to say that you are a leading business school in those areas. If you're not interested in those things, you know, you won't be successful in BGA anyway. Those are the key things I would say. Yes.
Which is the progression of online MBAs? AMBA.
We're totally open to online MBAs. They're totally allowed. We integrated. We used to have separate online accreditation criteria for online MBAs. We did away with that about 13, 14 years ago. We brought them all in-house, so they're treated as exactly the same. Obviously, the delivery mode is different.
How many?
How many?
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you. There are quite a few. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head how many there are. Okay. I've got a flashing 0 on my screen. Hopefully, I'm not about to explode. Okay, quickly, yeah.
Thank you, Mark, for a wonderful presentation. My question is on the integration side. So at IIM Ranchi, we have done a very interesting kind of an experiment in the term 6, where we are trying to let faculty from different area offer a joint elective course for the students. Mm-hmm. So this kind of initiative, can it be a part of the integration initiative where you're trying to look at?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be a great thing. Yes, yeah, and it's great for integrating faculty as well as for integrating the student experience as well. So I think that
right, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time, Steef. I apologise that I did not get to bring you in. Maybe in the afternoon session we can involve you more. But thank you so much. Thank you.